Most people believe the first $100,000 is the hardest milestone in personal finance. They're wrong. The first 100,000 is difficult, yes, but it's also clean. It's simple. You work, you save, you climb. Every decision feels obvious. Spend less, earn more, stay disciplined. And for a while, that formula works. But right after you cross that line, somewhere between stability and comfort, something quietly shifts. Not in your bank account, in your behavior. Here's the part most people miss. This is the point where wealth doesn't stall because of bad habits or reckless spending. It stalls because of something far more respectable: stability. I've spent years studying long-term wealth paths. People who looked identical on paper at $100,000 and ended up in completely different financial lives 10, 20 years later. Same income, same intelligence, same opportunities. Yet one group compounds quietly into freedom, while the other plateaus are permanently convinced they did everything right. So what's the difference? It's not risk tolerance, it's not investing knowledge, and it's definitely not a hustle. It's a psychological trap that activates the moment money stops feeling urgent. Here's an uncomfortable truth most finance channels won't say out loud. Stability feels like safety, but past a certain point, it behaves like gravity. It slows down decisions. It dulls ambition. It makes short-term comfort feel smarter than long-term leverage. And this matters more than you think because nothing breaks. Your life still works. Bills are paid, stress is manageable. From the outside, you look successful. From the inside, you're quietly locking yourself into a future that looks exactly like the present, just older. This is why so many people earn well, save consistently, and still never experience real financial acceleration. They don't fail, they stabilize. So let me ask you something. Have you noticed your urgency fade after hitting a financial milestone? Have you delayed a smart move because things are fine for now? Have you chosen predictability over progress without realizing it was a choice? If any of that feels familiar, this video is for you. Because the real danger isn't instability. It's getting comfortable too early and calling it maturity. By the end of this video, you'll understand the hidden rule that decides whether $100,000 becomes a launch pad or a ceiling. You'll see why intelligent people unconsciously protect the life they have, even when it limits the one they could build. And you'll recognize the exact moment stability turns from a foundation into a trap. Most people never notice when this switch flips. They just feel settled. And that's the moment their wealth story quietly stops being written. Stay with me, because the next part explains why your own brains start working against you the moment money stops feeling scarce. The first thing stability changes isn't your income. It changes how threatened you feel. Before $100,000, money feels fragile. Every decision carries weight. Miss one paycheck, make one bad move, and the consequences feel immediate. So your brain stays alert. You notice inefficiencies. You say no quickly. You move fast because you have to. But once your finances stop feeling tight, your nervous system stands down. This is where the stability trap begins. Here's the part most people miss. The human brain is wired to protect what already exists more aggressively than it's wired to build something new. That's loss aversion. But at this stage, it's quiet. You don't think, "I'm afraid to lose money." You think, "Why rock the boat?" Your emergency fund is full, your income covers your lifestyle, your investments are working. Nothing feels urgent. And because nothing feels urgent, your bar for action moves higher. Opportunities that would have excited you at 30,000 now feel unnecessary at 120. Not because they're bad, but because they introduce uncertainty. And uncertainty starts to feel irresponsible once stability becomes part of who you are. So you wait. You wait to change roles. You wait to invest differently. You wait to build systems instead of just saving harder. And waiting feels mature. It feels cautious. It even feels intelligent. But here's the hidden cost. Every year you delay leverage, you compound inertia instead of growth. Let me make this concrete. Two people hit $100,000 at the same time. Person A keeps optimizing for stability. Safer decisions, predictable returns, minimal disruption. Person B accepts controlled discomfort, learning curves, uneven income phases, temporary inefficiencies. 5 years later, person A feels calm, but unchanged. Person B feels stretched, but structurally different. Different skills, different options, different upside. Here's the rule, simple but brutal. Stability protects the present. Leverage builds the future. And if you don't deliberately reintroduce productive discomfort after hitting stability, your system defaults to preservation mode. Preservation mode is excellent at maintaining a life, but terrible at upgrading it. That's why people with good income say, I should be further ahead by now, without knowing why. Nothing went wrong. That's the problem. And this matters more than you think. The moment money stops feeling scarce is the moment your brain stops pushing you forward. If you don't notice that moment, you'll mistake comfort for progress and call it wisdom. In the next part, we'll break down the second layer of the trap, how stability quietly reshapes your identity and why that identity resists the very decisions that create real wealth. Because once stability becomes who you are, growth starts to feel like a threat. After stability changes how you see risk, it does something even quieter. It changes how you see yourself. At this stage, money stops being a problem you solve and starts becoming a signal of who you are. You're no longer building, you're established. And that single shift rewires your decisions more than any spreadsheet ever could. Here's the part most people miss. Once your financial system works, your identity starts defending it. You begin to describe yourself in calm, reasonable ways. I'm not a risk taker. I value balance. I don't need to chase more. None of these sound dangerous. They sound healthy, responsible, mature. But identity is sticky. Once you adopt it, your brain filters decisions through it automatically. Opportunities aren't judged on upside anymore. They're judged on whether they fit the person you believe you are. This is where things change. Two people with the same resources make completely different choices. One sees a move as an experiment. The other sees a disruption. One sees learning as leverage. The other sees unnecessary effort. Stability creates a self-image that says, I've figured it out. And the moment you believe that, curiosity declines, urgency fades, uncomfortable questions disappear. Am I structured for scale or just for comfort? Am I optimizing returns or minimizing friction? Am I protecting income or building systems? Most people never ask these because their identity answers for them. There's a payoff here, and it feels good. Consistency. When your choices match your identity, you feel calm, grounded, certain. But certainty is expensive. It costs you optionality. Real wealth requires seasons where your actions contradict your self-image. You look inconsistent. You feel clumsy. You're not sure you're doing it right. Stability-trained identities hate this phase, so they avoid it. That's why people say, I could do more, but I don't need to. What they're really saying is, doing more would force me to become someone unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe, even when the math says otherwise. Here's the system rule. Listen carefully. If your identity is built around being stable, your decisions will quietly cap your upside. This isn't about reckless risk. It's about identity flexibility, the ability to feel unpolished, incomplete, in motion. Ignore this, and the result is quite stagnant. Your numbers grow slowly, but your life architecture stays the same. You don't fall behind, you just never pull ahead. So here's the rehook. Most people don't get stuck because they lack resources. They get stuck because their identity won't let them outgrow their current level. In the next part, I'll show you this trap in motion through a story that makes the cost of stability impossible to ignore. Imagine pushing a heavy boulder up a hill. At the beginning, the ground is steep, unforgiving. Every step takes effort. You lean forward, your legs burn. Your focus is absolute. Because if you slip, the boulder rolls back and crushes you. This is the early money phase, survival mode. Progress is slow, but your awareness is sharp. Every movement matters. Then something changes. The hill flattens. The boulder still has weight, but now it rolls smoothly. You're not straining anymore. You can stand upright. You can rest your hands on top and guide it forward. This is what $100,000 feels like. Momentum without panic. And here's where most people make the same mistake. They stop pushing. Not because they're lazy, but because nothing is pushing back. The danger feels gone. The hill is flat. So instead of applying force to accelerate, they match the boulder speed and call it balance. Years pass on that flat stretch. Life feels fine. Work is manageable. Money grows, steadily, but quietly. The boulder moves, but only as fast as gravity allows. You're no longer shaping the path, you're just maintaining direction. Here's the part most people don't see. There's another hill ahead, a second incline, and it can't be climbed without momentum. Momentum only comes from deliberate effort, applied while things still feel easy. The people who keep pushing on the flat ground hit the next hill with speed. The people who coast arrive unprepared and stall. I've watched this happen again and again. Two people, same age, same income, same starting point. One treats stability as a pause. The other treats it as a platform. 5 years later, their lives don't resemble each other at all. One feels comfortable, but boxed in. The other feels stretched, but free. This metaphor reveals the hidden cost. Stability removes resistance, but resistance is what tells you when to push harder. Without it, your instincts mislead you. Your brain reads smoothness as success. In reality, it's just neutral. And the shift happens quietly. You start optimizing the walk instead of the destination. Shorter days, less friction, fewer unknowns. Each choice feels rational, but every one of them drains momentum. Then, one day, you notice something unsettling. The boulder feels heavy again, but now you're on an incline you didn't prepare for. Inflation, responsibility, age, expectations. The climb is back, but the energy isn't. And this matters more than you think. Stability doesn't ruin wealth in dramatic moments. It ruins it in the quiet years, when nothing forces you to grow. In the next part, we'll expose the third mechanism of the trap, the mathematical threshold where stability stops compounding and starts capping your future. There's a number most people stop calculating once they reach stability. Not net worth, not returns, speed. Early on, progress feels fast because every win is visible. Saving an extra $500 matters. A small raise changes your life. But after 100,000, the math shifts. Linear behavior stops producing noticeable change. And this is where the stability trap becomes measurable. If you have 100,000 invested earning a conservative 6%, you add 6,000 in a year. Useful, but psychologically invisible. Your lifestyle doesn't change. Your options don't expand. So your brain says, this is fine. Just keep going. Here's the part most people miss. Once growth becomes hard to feel, motivation separates from outcome. When effort doesn't feel rewarding, you stop applying it strategically. You default to maintenance, and maintenance math never creates acceleration. Now compare that to someone who treats stability as a base, not a finish line. They don't just ask, what's my return? They ask, what increases my rate of change? Maybe it's a new skill that lowers income short-term but raises the ceiling. A system that takes months to build but pays off for years. A structural shift that looks inefficient in year 1 and obvious in year 5. Stability-focused thinkers reject these moves because the short-term math looks worse, but long-term wealth is built by people who accept temporary drag for permanent lift. Let me show you the math. Person A grows net worth by $10,000 a year predictably for 10 years. Person B grows by 0 for 2 years while building leverage, then grows by $30,000 a year for 8 years. At year 10, Person B is far ahead, even though they underperformed early. This is the math stability hides. It rewards consistency over trajectory. It makes flat lines feel safe, even when they're quietly expensive. Here's the system rule. If your annual progress doesn't change your future options, it's not growth, it's preservation. And preservation feels responsible, right up until you notice how long you've been standing still. The emotional trap is subtle. You tell yourself you're patient, disciplined, long-term focused, but really, you're avoiding decisions that would temporarily shake your sense of control. That's why the most dangerous phrase at this level is, "I'll do it later." Later never comes when nothing is forcing your hand, and this matters more than you think. The moment your money grows slower than your life complexity, stability flips from an asset to a liability. In the next part, we'll look at the final layer of this trap, the decision patterns that lock it in permanently and the one shift that breaks it. By the time stability has reshaped your risk tolerance, your identity, and your math, it leaves behind one final lock: decision fatigue disguised as wisdom. At this stage, you don't feel stuck, you feel selective. You tell yourself you're more thoughtful now, more intentional. You've learned that not every opportunity is worth chasing. And that's true, but it's incomplete. Here's what's really happening. Once your life works, every meaningful upgrade demands multiple changes at once: time, energy, attention, reputation, comfort. And because stability trained you to minimize disruption, your brain starts rejecting decisions that require coordination, even when they're clearly right. So you default to small moves instead of structural ones. You optimize spending instead of redesigning income. You tweak allocations instead of building leverage. You research endlessly instead of committing imperfectly. Here's the part most people miss. This is why stable people often consume more financial content than unstable ones. Learning feels productive without forcing action. It keeps the identity intact. But here's the hidden truth. Wealth isn't built by making more decisions. It's built by making fewer, irreversible ones. Moves that change how your time compounds. Moves that shift who you work with. Moves that alter what your future self has access to. Stability trained minds avoid irreversible decisions because they shatter the illusion of control. Once you commit, you can't retreat to the comfortable version of yourself that had options without consequences. So instead, you keep everything reversible, flexible, low stakes. And that flexibility feels freeing until you notice it's capping you. Here's a system rule. If all your decisions are reversible, your progress will be too. Real financial inflection points come from choices that temporarily narrow your options while permanently expanding your upside. Stability resists this because narrowing options feels like loss, even when it's strategic. The consequence isn't dramatic failure, it's slow compression. Your calendar fills, your obligations grow, your margin shrinks. And suddenly, the decisions you avoided earlier aren't available anymore. That's when people say, "I should have done this sooner." Not because they didn't know, but because they waited until stability hardened into constraint. So here's the rehook. The final trap of stability is that it convinces you there's no rush, right up until timing becomes the problem. In the final part, I'll show you how to recognize when stability has done its job and how to step beyond it consciously without burning everything down. Stability isn't the enemy. Confusing it with the destination is. The real purpose of stability is to buy you a room to make better decisions, not to freeze you in place. It's meant to reduce fear, not ambition, to create space, not limits. And once you see that, the entire frame shifts. You stop asking, "How do I protect what I have?" And you start asking, "What does the stability allow me to build next?" That question changes your posture. You become less reactive, but more intentional. You accept short-term discomfort without panic because you understand the role it plays. You don't chase chaos, but you no longer worship calm. This is what life looks like on the other side of the trap. Your decisions become fewer but heavier. Your timelines get longer but clearer. Your confidence stops coming from predictability and starts coming from adaptability. You're no longer trying to feel settled. You're designing a system that keeps evolving with you. And this is the real hidden threshold after $100,000. The moment you realize comfort is a tool, not a signal that you're done. If this video resonated, it's probably because you're already standing on that flat ground, stable, capable, and slightly uneasy without knowing why. That unease isn't a warning, it's information.